is up, ya sexy wee middens? It is Dave. It's Duncan. Back from Metal Epidemic.
Well, the internet reaches straight for the closed captions to find out what Dave just said. Those in Scotland know, but are perplexed.
Yeah, we are back for another album review, and for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Danish industrial metalcore quintet, Interbeing. The band's new album, Icon of the Hopeless, is released on November 18th via Prime Collective. So, the Interbeing established a name for themselves on the industrial metal scene back in 2011 with the award-winning and highly acclaimed debut album, Edge of the Obscure, followed by their sophomore album, Among the Amorphous, in 2017. After touring Europe and Japan with acts such as 12 Foot Ninja, Parkway Drive, Meshuggah, and playing shows at festivals such as Copenhagen, Hoku, Music Week, SXSW, and Euroblast, the band began to focus on finishing their upcoming album. Icon of the Hopeless unveils the great conclusion to the conceptual story of a being that struggles with its creators in a dystopian parallel world, a story which listeners have followed since the debut album in 2011. Our souls are quite invested in the creation of this dystopian monster, and we are really proud of the result. Icon of the Hopeless is a thematic and liberating conclusion of our two previous albums. It is definitely more aggressive, the concept is completed, and the expression and the melodies are some of our best works so far, vocalist Dara Corcoran explains. Dara further explains the lyrical aspect is a direct continuation of the two previous albums, with our main character, the Interbeing, in the centre of our songs. Betrayed and abandoned by his creators, the Interbeing wakes up in the wake of his despair. His purpose seems to be lost, but he finds a new goal by gathering his equally outcasted creatures to destroy their malicious creators. The extermination of their creators produces a new future for the Interbeing and his rebellious followers as he transforms into the Icon of the Hopeless. The third full-length album has been mixed and mastered by producer Jakob Hansen, who has worked with Amaranth, Aborted, Volbeat, etc., etc. Okay, Duncan.
Okay, Dave.
Remember when cyber metal was a thing? Remember that?
Well, see, you say remember when cyber metal was the thing.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as never going away.
Do you? I feel like there's not that many representatives of that style at the kind of like the forefront anymore. Like, I'm sure there's still bands out there doing
well,
it.
I think that's the thing. I think its heyday has gone.
Yeah.
But the genre still exists.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's still out there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's all very post-Matrix, right? The Matrix came out and then it was like fucking Pill Neo, and then like a lot of bands started doing that cyber shit. And I'm not talking about bands that are... There's a distinct difference between the bands that are influenced from, like, say, Fear Factory, for example, in terms of music, and those that are influenced by Fear Factory from a concept point of view, right? And those are two different things. If you're using Fear Factory as the genesis point of that, you're like almost like ground zero. I see what I did. But musically, you get all those bands that become far more technical and triple picky, and the other ones that take all the kind of cyber sims that we would call that futuristic stuff, and then harness that into the metal sound. So you get this divergence. And I think the one that has proved more fruitful longer term is probably the sound stylings of a Fear Factory as opposed to the cyber stylings, because that will always be a fad. It will always be a thing that people are interested in for a while and then kind of lose out, and then you get a small gap and then a band comes back with cool samples and stuff and everyone's like, oh fucking shit, this sounds fresh. And then I listen to it and then it kind of ebbs and flows. It's a long way saying, Dave, that has peaks and troughs.
Ebbs and flows, I think there's a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest. Edge of the Obscure was that was my jam back in the day, Duncan. Like, I played that album to death.
Jesus. Dave getting slapped in the face with a memory there. Oh,
2011, no. Holy
I know.
shit.
Yeah, well,
What?
yeah.
How'd
Well,
that
but then I'll say it this way: have the Interbeing not just proved my point about you put out an album, you know, anything for a wee while,
Yeah.
then you come back when it sounds fresh and funky,
Yeah.
you go away for a wee while, then you come back and it sounds fresh and funky.
Yeah, well, it looks like there's like 5-6 years between albums for this band, which is just kind of like mind blowing. They've only had 3 albums out in the last like 11 years. So yeah, I didn't even really know much about this, to be honest. Like, I hadn't listened to any singles or nothing like that. I just heard a bit of news about it through email from the PR from the label, and then we got the album, and I was like, all right, okay, let's just do this. Like, I've already got an interest in this band, so definitely keen to check it out. I think like this still sounds like the Interbeing. Like,
still sounds like 2011. Is what you're saying?
a little bit.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not a criticism at all. So
yeah,
there is a comfort that comes in from pressing play on something that you remember the sound of, and it's still sounding that way.
Yeah, they've definitely got a sound, and you can tell it's still them. And I know this is going to sound cliche, but they do sound more mature on this album, and I know that's an obvious thing.
Yeah.
But like, even from the main, like the first track, Perplexion, I noticed like a slightly darker kind of vibe, and it felt a little bit more refined. The electronics are obviously still there; they're still a big part of their sound, but they weren't nearly as like upfront as I was expecting, or they have been on previous albums. Yeah. The kind of synth sounds and the electronics are a bit more balanced and blended, I suppose, with the music on this one. And I think, like, on occasion they're kind of like the cyber kind of side. I mean, it has the kind of tendency sometimes to feel like a bit like an add-on, like instead of it being kind of rooted in their sound.
A gimmick.
Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like on this album it felt quite tasteful. Like, it didn't feel like it was like, listen to synths, here's all the electronics. It didn't feel like that.
Synths in cyber metal can be utilised sarcastically in the same way that turntables can be used in new metal.
Yeah.
When you listen to it, you're like that. I don't think that. What is that guy actually doing out with like a little bit of scratching at the start and a little bit in the interlude?
Yeah.
Nothing. So why is he in the band? Like, and cyber metal could be the same way. It's like, you know, like you hold one synth note all the way through the verse, and then one through the chorus, and a sample at the start, and you're a cyber man. And yeah, I just want to stress, this is usually the sort of stuff that I listen to. I still listen to a lot of this shit.
Yeah.
But I think I'm so close to it, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
That it can sometimes get like, you can sometimes be a bit cringed when you're like, oh no, what's it doing?
Yeah, I felt like with this album, it was the electronics and the synths were there for a purpose. Yeah. Like, they were there to lift a chorus or add a layer of atmosphere to the verse. It felt way more controlled, and I think that could also be said for the rest of the album. I think they've nailed the kind of balance on this brilliantly. I think it's got a great ratio of those kind of big, like, sonic kind of groove riffs, but also has a really good helping of those epic choruses. And again, like, they've been doing this for over 10, 12 years, something like that. Yeah. So it's not like the most original thing you've ever heard. But you can't take the fact away that this is well written and it's well delivered. It's an album that will it kept my head bobbing, like, and like right through the album. I sat like this, going like, yep, right through every track. And once you've spun it 2 or 3 times, like, there's definitely a few choruses in there you're like in your head and you're kind of singing along as it comes round again. They use a lot of like similar formulas. Like, they've obviously got a kind of a technique and a way of writing their songs. So it maybe has a little bit. There's a couple of moments where it feels a little bit recurrent at times. Like, but the album's only 35 minutes, so
yeah, it's 35 minutes if you take the first track and the last track off.
Yeah.
The album's like 30 minutes, right? Yeah. So it's just like over 30 minutes. You spin the fuck out of this. Yeah. Like, there ain't no fat on this album at all.
Yeah. yeah, the kind of those kind of moments that felt a little bit repetitive, they're not. They don't feel too arduous to get through at all.
Yeah.
I think they've done actually a really good job of keeping the tone of the album in line with the previous releases as well. They've clearly got different productions between them. You can hear there's a kind of central kind of theme that's kind of tying them all together. I would say this release probably has bigger moments. A few of those riffs are, really get that like the stank face of approval. There's that. What was the track? Synthetic Bloodline, I think it was called. It's probably my favourite track on it. There's some killer like breakdowns and grooves on it, and it's one of those tracks that they actually do let the electronics and synths take more of a little bit of a more a step into the spotlight. They're not quite as kind of subtle on that track. And they were a wee bit reminiscent of like the Browning a little bit. There's a little bit kind of trancey almost like, and just in the kind of synth sounds that they used. And again, similar with Depressor.
Depressor is like so fucking clever. And like, there's like that riff comes in and there's gaps, but you hear it like you're like, oh, that's cool. But then when it loops to play it the second time, the gaps are filled by cool synth. And I was like, oh. Yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
Yeah, when they bring it back around, like it's the track itself has got it's like obviously like a bit of kind of like almost Mnemic in there, a little bit of Fear Factory, that kind of tightness in the riffs, lot of atmosphere and layers, and they do a clever trick with the guitars where they play a kind of really kind of heavy groove riff on the same kind of chord, same note for the entire song. And then towards the end, they give you the same riff, but they drop it down the fretboard, and it's like way heavier, and like, oh, the impact is like, wow. It works perfectly. It's really, really well done. I found a lot to enjoy. Like, if you like this band, if you like their sound, then I'm pretty sure you're going to dig this. The only thing that I'm slightly questioning, that I'm kind of on the fence about, and it's maybe a non-issue, possibly, but the production on this, right? And I love the stuff that Jakob's done in the past. It's very heavy, it's very modern, very slick sound, and everything sounds perfect, which suits the band sound. All right, they're a very kind of machine-like sounding band. I just get the feeling that it kind of lacks a little bit of personality. Like it's the production sounds like it could have been used on a number of other albums within this genre, if you know what I mean. It sounds good. It just doesn't sound that distinctive, if you know what I mean. But it's hard because it kind of suits the sound and the genre that it's in.
It's part and parcel of the genre. You aren't wrong. Yeah. You aren't wrong. I think, especially in today's world, in 2022, where like a lot of what they were doing, even a decade ago, would have been a lot more arduous to piece together and do. Yeah. Nowadays it's not that difficult. Here, I mean, you don't even need to be able to play a synthesizer anymore, Dave. This is the thing that makes me upset and keeps me awake at night. But you don't, like, you can download like pre-made fucking cyber sound patches and plug them into your Logic, and then before you know it, you're rocking out as a cyber metal band. So I get what you're saying. It's not an issue for me because it totally fits the sound. I think if it was one of those ones where I was listening, I was like, it's an odd choice of production for a band that sounds like this. It perfectly fits them. Yeah. You're right though. You could take this and superimpose it over, almost superimpose this over a new reformed Mnemic album or a new Raunchy album, or and it would fit fine. It would suit that, it'd suit fine.
Yeah. To be honest, like Deathcore's the same. You could probably do the same with Deathcore. So I'm probably just talking a lot of shit.
There are certain labels that do that, Dave. I don't know their names. I've forgotten them already. But
still, overall, I still enjoyed this one. I think there's a lot to like on this. I don't know where I'd put it in the in their catalogue in order. I think I still like that first album. I think Edge of the Obscure is still my favourite. But I think this one sounds more polished and probably more complete overall. What about yourself? What did you think?
I think you're right on that end statement there. Their edginess is kind of gone a little bit. It's been replaced by and I'll use the word as well, mature, because I think the songwriting's more mature. I think there's an understanding that you don't have to throw everything and the kitchen sink at a song.
Yeah.
Like, you can choose your moments, and sometimes those moments have more of an impact when they're placed in the right place, not overdone. And this is an album which is surprisingly subtle in parts, even though it is wall-to-wall, like, big stomping banger from track to track. I think as well, there's a focus on those melodic sections as well, and are really interested, like, they feel anthemic, which I like about it as well. I know their earlier stuff had that, but to me, once again, it felt like all the stuff around it was leading more in service of those anthemic moments, which that's good songwriting. I don't think the electronics are overused at all on the album. I actually think they're used surprisingly well. There's a couple of tracks you could have done more if they wanted, but that's a personal choice for me. That was in there and it worked really, really well. I think there's a lot of clever tricks with them that when I was listening to certain sections, I'm like, that I always come back to what would I have done if I had been in the band with a synthesizer, and you usually predict a lot in the same way that, like when listening to a metalcore album, you can usually predict when we're going to have a little bit of attack snare and things are going to pick up. And this one, I can usually predict where it's coming in. I usually can predict roughly what you're going to get. And then they would throw something which was not completely obscure, but they would do it in a way which felt like it was coming from a fresh angle. And I kept getting that in different songs. It wasn't conventionally used. In choruses, for example, it's not there just to lift the chorus up. They would be putting other things in service or holding back. I think when this album wants to be heavy, they do have another gear. Depressor is a great example of that. It feels at times like they're almost holding back on that. And once again, that might be in service of the concept of the album. It also might be that if we had more of that, Depressor isn't as heavy a track. I don't know. Maybe they want to keep those moments as special moments. I think once again that shows mature songwriting. It's very, very, very quick, very well produced. It did, and you kind of stole the win from my sails at the beginning when you were talking about cyber metal. There is a part of me that feels not nostalgic, but does kind of feel like we have moved on a bit since then. But the fact that this is Interbeing's third album, I think they get a pass on that. It'd be different if every second year we were getting an album that sounded like this from them. You mentioned The Browning. That's a band whose gimmick to me kind of ran out pretty quick. So there is a part of bands, whether you like them or loathe them, like Fear Factory, for example, have longevity because they kind of change the core components there, but the way they approach it, the ferocity or the more melody on albums to albums changes. That ratio is never the same. And Interbeing, if this is the conclusion to a 3-story arc or a 3-album arc, there is something that feels like the third act of a film, that this is grander, this is bigger, and it does culminate. Like at the end of this, there is a sense of finality, which they've captured that. So even from a cinematic point of view, which is where the concept sounds like it's going, I think they've captured that well as well. I suppose the metric it's held up to is the similar metric that you questioned at the end there. Is this the best Interbeing album? I think it's the best written one. It's not my favourite. So I think it's great. I think like part of me loves the fact that certain musical genres will not fucking die, and cyber metal will never fucking die. And I love it when it makes a little appearance every now and again, the same way that I get giddy whenever I hear a new metal riff in any band ever. I'm like, that's here forever. You tried to kill it, you just couldn't do it.
Yeah, very true. So, ratings for the Interbeing Icon of the Hopeless. Tough one to score for me, because I agree with you. I think this is probably the best written album. It probably sounds the most complete, but it's probably still not my favourite album. I think there is a kind of raw edge to that debut that's just a little bit more alluring than this is. And in 2022, am I still like as pumped about cyber metal? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. I think still very enjoyable. I think if you've been like part of the journey of this band, if you listen to their albums back in the day, then I'd definitely check this out. There's a kind of a streak of nostalgia about it. I think I'm going to go 3.5 on this one. What about yourself?
Oh, we are syncing up like motherfuckers tonight. Yeah, this is a 3.5. Oh. I had so much fun with this. I think it's once again, it's difficult not to, even if you're listening to it sarcastically and ironically, I still think the grooves are there. You headbang along with it. You can sing the choruses. It's well done, well put together. It's not my favourite thing they've done. And I'd be interesting to hear now that they have completed their 11-year 3 album story arc here, what the next one sounds like. I would like to see an album be a bit more daring, even though I've praised their maturity. Like there's a way to be a bit more experimental, push things out a bit more, but still approach it from a much more mature songwriting point of view, which I think they have in them. And it's just great. Listen, it's great to see these guys back doing what they're doing, and if you're a fan of the band, you're gonna fucking love this album. But yeah, 3.5 I think is it's where I'm leaning, Dave. It's what my conscience and my heart tells me to go.
Yeah, same. So the Interbeing, Icon of the Hopeless, drops on November 18th on Prime Collective. Links below to the band. Any pre-orders, all that stuff I'll stick in there. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Stick some comments in. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.